Are you disconnected, estranged, alienated, or possibly erased from your children's lives or your grandchildren's lives? Maybe some other family members you're struggling with? Are you thoroughly confused as to what's going on? Today, we'll dive in and unpack some of the dynamics that are happening in your life. We will label them and explain them, and you will walk away with a much greater understanding, a little bit more ease, less anxiety, and some confidence in moving forward. You don't want to miss this. This is definitely a foundational building block of recovering from this pathology and working with any form of estrangement, disconnection, or alienation. I was running around part of the time like a chicken with my head cut off. I was trying anything and everything just to get some relief from the pain, the anxiety, the fear. I just wanted my family back. I just wanted everything to go back to normal. It's fascinating, but I was reacting to stuff in the present that had already happened in the past. I was reacting to stuff in the present that already happened in the past, right? Like I didn't have the skill set to understand what was happening when it was happening, and I was trying to fix it in the present time. But it wasn't an access point because it already happened. It was a dark, lonely, humbling time. And from this place of just fear and loneliness and desperation, I was finally able to surrender. And when I surrendered, my healing journey started. Identifying and labeling some of the things that were happening in my life was incredibly important to me starting my journey of recovery. Today, we're going to dig into some really interesting ideas and terms, and these will definitely give you some great relief. And then at the end of today's show, I'm going to share a really great coping mechanism, something you can use on a daily basis just to get back into your body, just to re-regulate, which is going to make every relationship in your life seem just a little bit easier. Hi, my name's Lawrence Joss, and I like to qualify at the beginning of the show, and if you haven't heard any other episodes, for me, qualifying is just letting you know where I'm at in my journey of a disconnection, alienation, estrangement, whichever one of those words work for you. And if none of them work for you, you're still in the right place. Just come along for the journey. So when I qualify, I say, hey, my name is Lawrence. I qualify as an alienated dad. I have a 28-year-old daughter that I haven't had any contact with in 7 years. I have a 25-year-old daughter that it's been 4 years. I have 2 grandkids I'm yet to meet from that same daughter. And I have a 21-year-old daughter that I have regular contact with. And just to reiterate the statement, the kids aren't doing anything to me. They're just living their life and trying to get along, just like I was at their age. And they were brought up in a dysfunctional family. And they are using those skills as part of their foundation, and they're developing new skills, and they are incredibly happy and figuring out their own stuff, and I love them, and I don't have any kind of resentment or anger to them anymore. And in the beginning, I did. I just want to let you know, if you're angry and upset and pissed off at something or someone, that's natural. That was my process. And from that place of being dysregulated and angry, I definitely caused some harm. So what I'm going to share with you today, I think will be really useful in you understanding some of the dynamics of what's going on with the kids. For anyone that's newer than me to this journey, it must seem unsettling when I let you know how long it's been without contact with my 2 oldest kids. But the point of this podcast is that you don't have to do the same things that I did. If you practice the skills, use some of the resources that I introduce you to, educate yourself, at these certain inflection points, you don't have to go down the same rabbit hole that I went down. Like the amount of time that I've been separated from my kids, I'm 100% sure would not be where it is today if I had implemented some other skills, if there had been resources like this out there for me in the early days when I was struggling with this, when I couldn't define it. And for anyone out there that has been struggling with this for a long time, there's hope for you too. There's so many people in our community that are starting to implement these skills that are changing their relationships with kids that they haven't had contact with in 10, 15, 20 years. So let's just start with the idea of a family system, right? And a family system is a living, breathing thing. And the number one leverage point in the family system is the individual. So I just want to say that one more time. The number one leverage point in the family system is the individual. And in my family system, me as the individual, if I'm out doing some emotional and spiritual work and changing the way I communicate and changing the way that I show up, I can affect the family system. And it's important to understand something about the family system. It's like Jell-O. If you put pressure in one point of the family system, Like there's an indentation where your finger is. And if you pull out your finger, then the family system just goes back to where it started. So in creating change, the leverage on a family system needs to be consistent. You can't just pop in for a little bit, and if you don't get exactly what you want in the moment that you want, you can't pull out. Because when you pull out, it just goes back to everything that it knew before. That's something very important to understand. And when we're talking about family systems, we're talking about the immediate family, which is me, my ex, my 3 daughters. And when we talk about a little larger view of the family system, it includes my parents, my sister, my ex's parents, and her siblings. So it just extrapolates out and gets bigger, and then there's more and more dynamics that are affecting the family system. And another thing that I shared in the previous episode is the family system is like an iceberg. So when you actually see an iceberg, you're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. And the tip of the iceberg is generally what we're reacting to. But the change and the actual structure of the iceberg is underneath the water. And that is very much like our family system. Like I might be mad at someone, or someone might be mad at me about the Olympics. And then everyone concentrates on the Olympics, but it has nothing to do with that, right? That's just the event that's kind of kicking everything up. And underneath the Olympics is the emotions in the family, how the family was constructed, how people communicate with each other, how people show up. Are they angry? Are they sad? Are they loving? Are they judgmental? Do people gossip about each other? So that's how a family system functions. So family systems is really, really intricate to understanding what's happening. And I'm just touching on this briefly, and we're going to have some phenomenal people come in and talk about family systems so you can get a much greater understanding of it. I'm going to take a moment now to address the idea of splitting. And if you're not familiar with this term, what splitting means, it's actually related directly to the kids. So when the kids are living a life where they're living with you part of the time and your ex-partner part of the time, and they're feeling really confused about the different messaging they're getting from different parents, it becomes really, really, really hard for them to live in these two completely different universes, these two different worlds as they switch homes and as they navigate different spaces. So at a particular point, the kids actually split off. And what that means is they split off from their authentic self in order to survive. So they usually gravitate towards one parent and become really enmeshed with them, and they cut out the other parent. And this seems like on the outside that they're doing something really adverse to one particular parent. But what they're really doing is they're trying not to die. They're cutting off part of their experience so they can just exist in the one house that they need to exist in. If you want to learn more about splitting, there's a phenomenal practitioner out of the UK. Her name is Karen Woodall, Woodall, and I'll definitely put a link in the show notes for you. And she specifically spends a lot of time talking about splitting. And the neat thing about her framework is it's very children-centric. It's not having one side opposing another side and the good and the bad. It's really about integrating the whole family together and creating healing. And I love what she has done around educating people around splitting. She has classes for parents where she breaks down everything developmentally, what's happening with the kids. I would definitely spend the money. It's really inexpensive. It's 3, 4, 5 hours, and there's so much phenomenal information that is going to transform your relationship with your kids. And it's also going to settle your nervous system because you're going to understand so much more. And her husband, Nick Whittle, has a great YouTube video that's 15 or 16 minutes long that explains splitting. And like right after this episode, I would jump on there, click the link below, and watch it. And it's just a great education. Another really important thing that gets developed in family systems initially is attunement. So attunement is just being really, really present with yourself or present with another. So self-attunement is when I'm really present in my body and feeling my emotions and just showing up, right? Like I'm not using something like alcohol or food or TV to kind of like check out, because then I'm not really attuned to myself. And if I'm not really attuned to myself, then I can't really be attuned to anyone else. And if you're really curious what attunement looks like, after this episode, find someone in the house or someone that you know or tomorrow at work and just have a conversation with them. But when you're having a conversation, be really intentional about being really present in your body. And then when you're making eye contact, you'll either feel really, really connected to that person and like there'll be this symbiotic relationship between you. And that's attunement. And if someone's kind of like checked out and you both aren't really present, then you'll know what attunement doesn't feel like. And for me growing up, I used to confuse attunement and love because I did not receive attunement in my family of origin. I had to go out into the world as a young adult and start to feel what that feeling looked like. And I used to confuse it with love because I just didn't get that in my family of origin. So that's something really important, a really simple exercise that you can go out and do. And the reason that I bring up attunement, because as you're struggling with any form of disconnection, alienation, or estrangement, like you're going to need to be really present in order to change something in your life. And we want to concentrate on the relationships with our children and like the really high stakes relationships. But I'd say, hey, practice this on lower stakes relationships. Start to develop the muscle. And as you develop the muscle, you'll become more and more present with yourself, with others, and then your relationships that are closer to you start to transform. Like attunements transformed every relationship in my life, including with my parents, with my sister, and other really close relationships. So let's talk a little bit about estrangement, alienation, erasure, and even disconnection. Right? Each word, if you look it up, has different meanings and different definitions. And for our purpose here, it's more of this pathology where we're struggling to connect with our kids and there's some kind of breakdown, or our grandkids or our brother or sister or whatever it is. And I think all the words are interchangeable, and each word is really important to check out and learn the definition. And the research behind parental alienation, gives you some really important key markers that you can look at and you can understand some of the things that are happening. And then you take it and you leave what you want. I'm not holding on to any particular term really, really, really strongly. I'm just showing up to improve my life and improve my relationships. So I just wanted to name that and identify that. I also want to just share a little story. When I found out about parental alienation and I read some books, and there's some great people out there and authors out there that have some really interesting stuff to say, and I will put a link in the show notes that you can check out a bunch of different resources. But as soon as I learned about this word, it felt like really important to share this with my kids. It felt like some kind of seminal breakthrough, and I had to tell them about it. And I bought a bunch of books and I was going to mail them out. And as I was reading the book, it says, don't mail this book to your children, right? Don't mail this book to your children. Again, the framework is really useful to understand and start to navigate some of the difficulties that you're challenging with. But to give this to people that aren't interested in it or aren't buying into it is not useful. And I didn't send a book, but I started to send videos and different kinds of things like that to my kids, and I got some really bad pushback. And it's not that they were doing anything wrong. I was trying to shove something down their throat. And my goal in shoving something down their throat was just to get them to love me, not to leave me, just to be good enough. And it wasn't useful. So don't do what I did. Don't create harm, because the harm will take your breath away. Yeah, the harm will give you fear and anxiety on a whole different level. And it's not a rabbit hole worth going down. It does not work. Another really important concept is self-agency. So self-agency is acting on your own behalf. And what example I can give you is like if you're at a conference or you're somewhere and you're trying to be a good person and you don't want to leave the room or a meeting or something like that, and you really got to go to the bathroom. That's not being in self-agency. Self-agency is realizing, wow, I need to go to a bathroom. I need to take care of myself, excusing yourself, taking care of yourself, and coming back. And I know that sounds silly, but I know for me, I was trained at a young age to be polite, to be a good boy, to do the right thing. And doing the right thing was kind of giving away my power and staying in situations that weren't necessarily great for me. I was on a Zen retreat. And during the retreat, you get to have like 10 or 15-minute meetings with your teacher. And I had a meeting with my teacher, and I'm like, hey, I'm having all these innocuous conversations, and I feel like people are talking at me, and I don't know what to do. And my teacher looked at me and he said, don't have the conversations. And that was the first time in my life that anyone gave me permission to take care of myself and just to leave and act in self-agency, in self-volition. So that's really, really important, because part of the way that I feed into this pathology is I give away my agency. I show up in fear and wanting to people please and take care of people, and I lose myself and it creates harm. So if you're not in self-agency, you're going to be something called a high agent. And a high agent means someone that wants to take care of other people, that wants to fix them, that wants to show them the right way and the right way to do things. And the reason this is so important with parental alienation and estrangement and erasure, we want to fix the other person. We want them to see the way we see. We want them to have this gospel, and we're in their space. We're trying to control them. We want to make sure that they're okay, and we're the only people in the world that can make them okay. And it's just not true. It's suffocating, it's inundating, and it's not useful, and it creates a lot of harm. And I did that with my kids. I created harm, and I did not know I was creating harm. I was just doing what I was taught to do in my family of origin as a little kid, right? And again, it's a rabbit hole that you don't need to go down. If you can learn to regulate yourself through meditation, breath, taking a walk, or whatever else relaxes you and gets you back in your body, it's going to be incredibly useful. In this way, you can get back into self agency. And from a place of self agency, you can start to heal relationships, especially with your kids. They don't want to regulate you. You know, my kids at a time had to regulate me. My parents taught me to regulate them. So naturally, I taught my kids that it was part of what they needed to do. And part of parental alienation and estrangement is we're using our kids to regulate us. And when it gets to a really bad degree and families start to fall apart, the kids are filling in that role with one parent or the other. And that's how this pathology kind of like takes off and gets out of hand. And I'd like to say, in any of this parental alienation, estrangement, disconnection, erasure, like everyone has a part. This isn't just happening by itself. You know, I guess I'm an alienator too, is what I want to say to you. I didn't always say the best things about my ex wife. I wasn't always positive about stuff. I tried to frame stuff in ways so my kids would love me and take my side and not leave me. So I just want to say, like, this thing starts to get its own kind of inertia, and we all contribute in one way or another. And that's why it's so important to understand these terms. And that's why it's so important for me to come from a place where I'm healing myself emotionally and spiritually. So I'm no longer dumping the stuff out in all different directions, and I'm no longer perpetuating the disease. Something else that's really interesting to understand is a loyalty contract. So a loyalty contract is something that happens very similar to the example that I just gave you when I'm trying to regulate my nervous system, sometimes through someone else. So the loyalty contract is I'm going to use your nervous system to regulate myself, and then I'm going to love you. And if you don't let me use your nervous system to regulate myself, then I'm going to leave you. So the love becomes this like mechanism that we control the relationship. And that's what a loyalty contract looks like. You do something for me, and then I will love you. If you're wondering how loyalty contracts relate to your children, I would just consider the family dynamics that you're witnessing. And you're seeing how one child or two children or all the children are relating to one parent in a particular kind of way. And you can't really understand what's happening. This is a loyalty contract that really enmeshed, entwined with one parent, because one parent might be using a mechanism of withdrawing love, giving praise, withdrawing praise as a mechanism to control something. And this is the loyalty contract. The child needs to be really good, center that parent, and love them more than anything else. And if they start to concentrate on the other parent, then the parent that's in the loyalty contract, the loyalty bind, starts to withdraw their love, and the kid's nervous system starts going crazy. They get anxious. They don't know what to do, and they have to go closer to their parent that's enforcing the loyalty contract in order to survive. So when you're seeing that dynamic, it's not that the child doesn't want anything to do with you. The child's nervous system has been programmed in a way that they have to go back closer to that parent in order not to go into a full-on trauma response or disassociate or whatever is going to happen. So it's really, really useful to understand that dynamic. Oh, let's move on to triangulation. So triangulation is when we involve more than one person in a conversation, right? So if I'm having a conversation with you and I get some information and then I pass it on to a third person, and this third person has never had a conversation with you, but they heard from me what happened in the conversation, and they decide that what I told them was completely accurate, true, and real, and now they formed an opinion about me or about something that I was talking about. So three people have been triangulated together. Oftentimes there's more people involved in a triangle. And the interesting thing about a triangle is a triangle rotates on its axis. And because it rotates on its axis, different people go to different corners of the triangle at different times. So there's something called a drama triangle. And what the three components of a drama triangle are, there's the perpetrator, there's the victim, and then there's the enabler. And the drama triangle just rotates on its axis all the time, and everyone rotates from position to position in a dysfunctional family. So you can be any one of those places at any time. And from second to second, it can change. And the way to kind of get out of this system of this drama triangle is to actually do the spiritual and emotional work and not to triangulate people in, to have boundaries, to take care of yourself, to be in self agency, to be attuned to yourself. And then you kind of like leave that system. And leaving that system is incredibly healthy, and it creates some pushback because the system's not used to you being healthy. They're not used to you being changing. But it's part of the evolution of the growth and the healing within a system that's as dysfunctional as this. The reason triangulation is so important when it comes to your kids is you can notice the dynamic when your children are talking to you and they're repeating back something that they didn't hear from you, but they're taken as gospel, and they've actually heard this from another parent or another relative. And you can see how the child has been triangulated into a conversation that didn't really have anything to do with them. And now they're believing everything that they heard. And a lot of this stems from a lack of boundaries. And you can't control another person or make someone else do anything, but you can start to work on your boundaries and your containment right around triangulation. So as you work with triangulation and you implement boundaries and stuff, you're no longer really sucked into the dynamic where you're actually perpetuating some of the harm by being part of the triangulation in your conversations. So this is another leverage point in the family system where you can start to create change. So have boundaries. Don't triangulate or start to get other people involved in a conversation. Talk directly to the kids that you want to talk to, or relatives or friends or people at work. So you actually have that conversation directly with them. It's not going through another person. So it's actually one-on-one conversation. And this way you avoid the triangulation, and that supports a healthy relationship. Oh, this is another one of my favorites. The secret handshake or the unilateral agreement. They both basically mean the same thing. So the secret handshake is when I make an agreement with you about I'm going to behave a certain way, and then you're going to do something specific. So I'm going to be a really good boy, and then you're going to love me. The thing about the secret handshake and the unilateral agreement is we never tell the other person about it, but we expect them to behave a certain way. And again, this comes out of my family of origin where we had these unilateral agreements, and I was going to be a good boy, and then my dad was going to love me. And then I was always a good boy. And sometimes he loved me and was really present, and sometimes he wasn't present at all, and he was doing his own thing, and he was triangulating me into different scenarios and stories, and he was using my nervous system to regulate him. And it just wasn't good. So, as an example for me in a secret handshake or a unilateral agreement with my daughters is I'd be really, really nice. I'd take the high road. I would always try to be the best possible father. I'd pay for a bunch of things. I would support them. And my secret handshake is I'm going to do all these things, and you're going to love me, and you're not going to leave me, and everything's going to be okay. So you can see how me not being explicit with what I was doing or having boundaries or asking for my needs to be met caused this environment where it's really, really unhealthy. I have an expectation of my daughters. I've never actually had an explicit conversation about what's going on and what our agreements are. And it creates an environment for dysfunction. So if you want to avoid so many of the pitfalls that I've gone through, really consider being explicit, being really clear, having agreements, making sure you're having your child repeat back to you what you're saying. So you're actually clear that they understand and have a concept of what you're talking about, and it's not just something in your head. So another great tool to work with. Another interesting thing about the secret handshake and the unilateral agreement is it just doesn't happen in our family system, right? For me, I take these coping mechanisms and these behaviors, and I go out and I recreate these in every instance in my life. I recreate them at work. I recreate them on teams. I recreate them within friend circles. So it's really important as we start to acknowledge these things and we learn about these things, and then we start to interrupt how we show up in places. And again, we show up more integrated, attuned, in self-agency, with boundaries. All really, really good stuff. And each of these topics we're going to dig into individually in shows in the future. So the things that I want you to take away from my personal story is I created a lot of harm when I wasn't really, really present with myself. I created a lot of harm when I wasn't in self-agency, when I was being a high agent and trying to take care of people and trying to fix my kids or fix someone else. I was creating harm. I was inundating them, which means I was suffocating them and they didn't know what to do. And in essence, they had to pull away. Like they couldn't tolerate what was happening with me because I was so dysregulated and had so many emotions going on. I was overwhelming them and other people in my life. So this work that we're talking about changes that. It changes our regulation. It changes our ability to show up in relationships. So the takeaway again is learning to regulate, learning to get back into our body, learning to be present with ourselves. The next episode is going to be awesome. We're going to start to talk about tools that you can implement today to change your life. We're going to talk about meditation. We're going to talk about NVC, which is nonviolent communication. We're going to talk about breath work. And we're going to talk about some other resiliency practices that you can, again, start practicing today. And each one of these taken separately are phenomenal. And as you start to combine them in your life, they will be life-changing. Oh, I forgot to mention journaling. By far, one of the most important tools that I use. Just getting stuff out of my body and out of my mind and onto a piece of paper just creates a bunch of different space and gives me some relief. And just to reiterate why these skills are so important, they are disruptions in the system of alienation, estrangement, erasure, disconnection, whatever it is. If I'm practicing these skills and I'm becoming more integrated and grounded when I interact with my children and other family members, it doesn't go sideways as much and as often because I'm more grounded, because I have a different skill set, because I have boundaries, because I'm not diving into these secret handshakes and these unilateral agreements. I'm actually showing up as an authentic, grounded person when I'm entering these relationships. And I'm not going there to get something. I'm just entering a relationship as a person. And that's a really important distinction because the kids or other family members potentially are usually coming to a conversation needing to get something from the other person. And I usually go to those kind of conversations needing something. And as I work on myself spiritually and emotionally, I don't need something from someone else. I come there just to enter into a relationship and not to take something from it, but to join with it. I was at one of my support group meetings one day and someone mentioned the idea of a soup sandwich. And I'm like, a soup sandwich? What does that mean? And they went on to share that a soup sandwich is something you just can't get your hands around. You can't grip it. You can't hold it. It just kind of is just soupy and it's just a liquid and you want to try and eat it as a sandwich. And that's what parental alienation, estrangement, disconnection has felt like at times. It's just a soup sandwich. I can't get my hands around it. I don't know what to do with it. And I'm hungry and I want to eat something. So I'm going to give you 3 things that you can start working with today in order to have an actual sandwich that you're able to eat. Number 1 is attunement. You know what I mean? When you're in a conversation or you're showing up at some kind of event, check in with yourself. Maybe take 5 or 10 deep breaths. Feel your body, feel your feet on the ground, and just kind of come home. It's really simple and it might sound silly to you, but so much of the time I'm disembodied. And when I come back into my body, I show up in a completely different way. Number 2, journal and journal often. There's some great books out there that will give you prompts on daily things to journal on. I would highly suggest it. There's a book called Courage to Change, which I will put a link in the show notes for you. It's actually an Al-Anon book, and it will say alcoholic and alcoholism a bunch of different times in there, and I just replace it with alienation or alienator. And the prompts are fantastic, and I've been journaling on this for years. And in some of my darkest days, it was one of the best things that I did in the morning for myself was to read the prompts, read the daily reflection, and journal. And you can use any kind of prompt. There's so many different things with positive intentions and positive ideas out there that you can work with. And I would say number 3 is find people that you can talk to, people that are struggling with the same thing. And I'm not talking about your family or your regular friends. Join a support group, which I mentioned the first time, and I'll put a link again in the show notes so you can get to a meeting. You can check out some different organizations that might be incredibly useful for you and meet some people that are struggling with the same thing. And the nice thing about the support group that I'm going to introduce you to is everyone is trying to recover an emotional and spiritual relationship with himself. Everyone is working on these things. It's a great place to get community, find people to talk to, find a place of grounding. So those 3 things are something you can do today, right now, and start finding your feet a little bit. So I want to share a really simple tool that you can use literally right when you get off this podcast if you have the time. What I would like you to do is I'd like you to set your alarm on your clock on your telephone, on your watch for maybe 12 noon every day or a time right around there that feels appropriate for you. And each time your alarm goes off, I want you to just take 1 minute of silence and meditation. If meditation feels kind of complicated to you, complete silence, no devices, nothing around you, a place that's private where you can just be with yourself. And if you're okay with meditation, what I'd suggest is setting your timer for 1 minute, closing your eyes, and then just concentrating on your breath. And all you're going to do is you're going to concentrate on your breath coming in through your tip of your nose, and you're going to concentrate on your breath coming out through the tip of your nose. Just breathing in through your nose and breathing out through your nose. And after a minute has gone, you're just going to go back to work, and you're just going to find yourself being more grounded, more in your body, regulated, and use this as often as possible whenever you're feeling dysregulated. And over time, I would suggest, growing it out to 2 minutes, to 3 minutes, to 5 minutes. Throughout my day, I'm taking 1 minute breaks, 2 minute breaks, breathing into my body, breathing into certain parts of my body, being really quiet, putting my devices down. And it's incredibly, incredibly useful to me and to everyone that has to get in relationship with me that day. Also in the show notes will be a link to the Family Hope Project, which is a worldwide advocacy project that we're putting together, where you send out some kind of creative art and everyone gets to express a little bit about what's going on with them in their struggle with alienation, estrangement, or disconnection. And we're going to use it as a platform to teach, amplify, encourage change, whether it's in the legislation or just in our lives or in mental health or anything like that. So we'd really appreciate if you'd participate in that. And then there's also going to be another link down there for you to click to participate in the support groups if you're interested in that. And lastly, there'll be a link if you want to attend a meditation group, and there'll also be some questions and answers and meditation we're going to get into in the next episode. And it's a great place to resource yourself. And if you've never tried meditation, doesn't matter. If you don't think you can meditate, doesn't matter. And everything is welcome, and it has changed my life. And lastly, please share on social media if this feels useful. Share with families and friends. And I hope to see you on the next episode. Happy days to all of you.